Hi, I'm Clinton Jones, Michigan State University College Hall of Fame in football and track and field, and also National College Football Hall of Fame. We were national champions in 1965 and 1966. You're watching Duffy Doherty's Milestone Minutes with Tom Shanahan. Go Green!
Welcome to Milestone Minutes. I'm Tom Shanahan. Today we're talking about the greatest Spartan of them all, George Webster. Bubba Smith is the most famous Spartan ever because he was such a character and so big and so fast for his time. And Jimmy Ray is the most socially significant Spartan for his time as both a black quarterback in the 60s on these national championship teams, and then as a pioneering black coach in college with Michigan State, and then later in the NFL. But George Webster is the greatest Spartan of them all. George had his number retired in 1967, his number 90, just a year after the back-to-back national championships in 65 and 66. Usually you don't get numbers retired even nowadays after just 1 year, so even less so back in those days. So that just shows you the great respect George Webster commanded at Michigan State. At the retirement ceremony, Duffy Doherty said, "George Webster is not only the finest player I've ever seen, he symbolizes our 1965 and 1966 teams." And when Michigan State and Notre Dame were getting ready to play their game of the century, November 19th, 1966, a quasi-national championship, Terry Hanratty and Coley O'Brien were the Notre Dame quarterbacks looking at game film in preparations to play Michigan State. Now, Coley O'Brien was the backup, but he ended up playing most of the game because Bubba Smith separated Terry Hanratty's shoulder in the second series of the game. And then I talk about this in the book Ray of Light. Coley O'Brien talking about how they all respected George Webster more than anybody else. He said, "George Webster was the guy we feared the most. We watched their film and we said, that's George Webster." That was the kind of fear and respect George Webster had. Another thing about George Webster was Jim Lynch was Notre Dame's All-American quarterback, played 11 years for the Kansas City Chiefs. He won the Maxwell Award, which is also for the best player in college football, although not as famous as the Heisman Trophy. So Jim Lynch wins the Maxwell Award, but he says George Webster should have won the Heisman. That's how much respect he had for George Webster. And in this sad commentary on America in the 60s, there were only two college football players that got votes in the Heisman top 10, both of them from the segregated South. Arkansas's Lloyd Phillips, Georgia's George Patton. Neither one of them could play anywhere near George Webster or Bubba Smith. George was a team captain along with Clinton Jones. They were elected by their teammates. It was the first time there has been two black team captains elected. Michigan State had had black captains going back to the 50s, but they always shared it with a white player. Jimmy Ray told me this story, and it's in Ray of Light. If there was a bad series or a bad play, a defense, and then the defense huddled up, George Webster didn't have to get in your face. All he had to do was clap his hands and say, "Come on, y'all." And everybody snapped to attention and started playing better. George loved his time at Michigan State, not just the football team, Michigan State as a school and an institution and as an oasis from the segregated South. George said when he first went to classes at Michigan State as a freshman, it was the first time he sat in a room with white people without feeling tension. Later, in 2006, the George Webster Scholarship was founded, and that's for Michigan State athletes that graduated, but they're still a few credits shy of earning their degree, and their scholarship has run out. So that gives them a chance to come back to campus. One other good story about George Webster to show you the respect he commanded on that football team is Bubba Smith was kind of turned it on and off in practice. He was known for that. Always had it turned on when it was a week of a TV game. The other games, he might just go through the motions. And this story's in Ray of Light also. Vince Carolot, an assistant coach at that time, was real frustrated with Bubba not practicing hard with his attitude. And so he just went up to George Webster and said, George, we're having trouble with Bubba. Can you get him to practice? George went over and said something to Bubba, and that was the end of it. And Vince Carolot said, I don't know what he said to Bubba to this day, but we never had a problem with him again after that. That was George Webster, the greatest Spartan of all time.